There are battles that leave visible scars, shrapnel wounds, missing limbs, medals pinned to uniforms like punctuation marks on stories of valor. But there are also battles that happen far from the battlefield, where no bullets fly and no flags wave. These battles are fought in silence, in everyday places like diners, bus stops, and grocery aisles, where dignity meets indifference, and a veteran's worth is measured not by their service, but by how quietly they endure. This is the story of one such battle. It didn't happen under enemy fire or in a war-torn city across the sea. It happened on a quiet Thursday afternoon beneath the buzzing neon sign of a roadside diner in small-town America. No one expected history to be made that day. No news cameras rolled. No parades lined the streets. But for those who were there, for those who saw what unfolded, it would be remembered not as an incident, but as a turning point. It's about a woman named Marianne, a former Marine, a fighter, a survivor, and the day the world tried to knock her down again, only to find she still stood taller than most. Marianne pushed open the diner's door, and a small bell announced her arrival. She maneuvered her wheelchair carefully among the lunchtime crowd. A waitress hurried to move a chair aside, and Marianne gave a thankful nod. Despite her efforts to blend in, she felt a few curious eyes on her. She was used to that by now. Dressed in a faded Marine Corps sweatshirt and jeans, Marianne tried to remain inconspicuous as she rolled up to the counter. The diner smelled of coffee and bacon grease, familiar and comforting. Still, Marianne's nerves fluttered. It had been a hard morning at the VA hospital, more paperwork and another tiring physical therapy session. She craved nothing more than a quiet meal. Taking a steady breath, she folded her hands to keep them from trembling. Focus on the now, she reminded herself, letting the clink of dishes and the low hum of a jukebox tune calm her. She had just started to relax when the diner's door banged open behind her, followed by a burst of raucous laughter. As they jostled inside, one of the newcomers nearly tripped over the footrest of Marianne's wheelchair. "Watch where you park that thing," he snapped, irritation and embarrassment flashing in his eyes as if the stumble was her fault. "I'm sorry," Marianne murmured, instinctively wheeling herself closer to the counter to be out of the way. The man who had tripped, wearing a sleeveless flannel shirt that showed off tattooed arms, looked her up and down. "They let anybody in here these days, huh?" he said loudly. His buddy, a lanky kid with a baseball cap turned backwards, snorted with laughter. Marianne felt heat creep up her neck. A few people glanced over but quickly returned to their meals. The waitress behind the counter froze in place, a coffee pot in her hand, uncertain whether to intervene. Flannel Shirt planted himself beside Marianne's chair. "Nice sweatshirt," he said, eyeing the faded Marine's lettering on her chest. "Where'd you get it? Thrift store?" Marianne's pulse quickened. "It was mine," she answered quietly. "I earned it." Baseball Cap stepped around to her other side with a skeptical smirk. "You a Marine?" "For real?" He leaned in, peering as if searching for a lie on her face. "Don't seem likely. Maybe you drove a desk, but you ain't no real soldier." "I was a sergeant. I served 2 tours," Marianne replied, lifting her chin despite the fear tightening her throat. "I got hurt in the line of duty." Her voice faltered on the last words, but she forced herself to hold their gaze. Flannel Shirt rolled his eyes dramatically. "So what? You expect a medal? A thank you parade?" Flannel Shirt scoffed. "Plenty of folks serve without making a show. You roll in here expecting special treatment?" Marianne's heart pounded. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I just want to eat." "Then maybe eat somewhere else," Baseball Cap said coldly. "Some of us don't like seeing reminders of war when we're trying to enjoy a burger." That one stung. Marianne opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. Shame and anger warred inside her, leaving her trembling and speechless. Flannel Shirt noticed the chain glinting at Marianne's neck, and before she could stop him, he hooked a finger around it. He pulled out her dog tags, holding them up as if he'd found a prize. Marianne gasped and reached for them, panic rising in her chest. "Give those back," she pleaded, her voice taut. He dangled the tags just out of her reach. "What's the big deal? You can have 'em back if you just will yourself on out, hero." His tone dripped with mockery. Baseball Cap snickered, though his laughter sounded more nervous now. Marianne felt moisture in her eyes. She blinked furiously. She would not cry. Not here. But the sight of her dog tag swinging like a cheap trinket was too much. A tear escaped anyway, streaking down her cheek. Flannel Shirt's grin widened at that. "Ah, don't cry now," he sneered. He tossed the tags lightly between his hands as if deciding whether to give them back or keep tormenting her. Marianne's chest constricted. She glanced around at the other diners, silently begging someone, anyone, to step in. But chairs stayed occupied, eyes averted. In the corner booth, the old man in the trucker cap had his phone out, quietly sending a text with a shaking hand. At the counter, Marianne sat trembling, alone against the two men towering over her. The humiliation was suffocating, her vision blurred with tears. Marianne closed her eyes and braced herself for whatever came next. Then came a sound, the jingle of the doorbell, and the heavy fall of footsteps. Marianne looked up through her tears. 4 men stood in the doorway, their silhouettes broad and imposing against the afternoon light. Their jackets bore Marine insignia, and their posture and eyes made their identity clear. In an instant, they took in the scene. Marianne in her wheelchair, cornered and tearful, the 2 younger men looming over her, the dog tags glinting in Flannel Shirt's grasp. The eldest of the newcomers stepped forward, his boots thudding on the linoleum. Solidly built, with close-cropped, gray-streaked hair, he spoke in an even tone. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" Flannel Shirt blinked in surprise. He hadn't noticed anyone coming in. He tightened his grip on the dog tags and tried to square his shoulders. "No problem," he muttered. "Just a private conversation." The older Marine's jaw clenched. He glanced at Marianne, taking in her red eyes and the fear etched on her face. And then his gaze settled on the tags in the bully's hand. "It doesn't look that way," he said quietly. "Those belong to the sergeant. How about you give them back?" Baseball Cap backed away instinctively. The other 3 Marines had spread out subtly, surrounding the 2 bullies without even needing to raise their fists. Their presence alone was enough. Flannel Shirt gave a short, hollow laugh. "Or what?" he retorted, but the quiver in his voice betrayed him. "Or," said the older Marine evenly, "we will make it our business." For a tense moment, Flannel Shirt stood frozen. The diner was deathly quiet. Finally, with a frustrated grunt, the bully slapped the dog tags down on the counter beside Marianne. The metal clattered against the formica. Marianne released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Now," the Marine said, "you owe the sergeant an apology." Flannel Shirt's face flushed red. He realized he was outnumbered and outmatched. Baseball Cap was already inching toward the door. With a dark glare, the lead bully swallowed his anger. "I'm sorry," he bit out. Then after a pause, he added, "Ma'am." Marianne simply nodded, pressing her lips together. The older Marine jerked his head toward the exit. "Time to go," he said. Neither bully needed telling twice. With one last look of resentment, they slipped away, the door jingling as it swung shut behind them. A collective exhale followed their exit. The diner fell silent, but for the faint sizzle on the griddle. Marianne realized she was shaking. Gingerly, she gathered her dog tags from the counter and closed them in her fist to reassure herself this was real. The older Marine kept a steady hand on her shoulder. "You okay, Sergeant?" he asked gently, leaning down to meet her eyes. Marianne wiped her damp face with her sleeve. Yes, thank you," she managed, voice trembling, but sincere. She looked at each of the Marines in turn. "Thank you all." In the corner, the elderly man in the Vietnam vet cap rose unsteadily to his feet. He brought a trembling hand up in a salute. Only then did Marianne notice the cell phone in his other hand, and she understood who had called in the cavalry. Marianne acknowledged the old veteran's salute with a grateful nod, locking eyes with him in silent thanks. He lowered his hand and pressed it over his heart. The waitress finally found her voice. "Ma'am," she called softly, "your lunch is on the house. For all of you." Murmurs of agreement traveled through the diner. Chairs scraped as one by one people stood. The older couple by the window, the 2 truck drivers at a table, all those who had pretended not to see were now standing, their faces solemn and respectful. The lead Marine stepped back and snapped a sharp salute toward Marianne. In unison, the others did the same, 3 hands to their brows alongside his, honoring her. Marianne's breath caught in her throat. She hesitated only a second, then lifted her own hand and returned their salute. Back straight, chin up, She held it as tears of pride rolled down her cheeks. In that silent moment, an ordinary diner became a place of honor. What had begun in cruelty was ending in respect. After a long beat, the Marines lowered their arms. The older Marine met Marianne's eyes. "Semper Fi, Sergeant," he said quietly. Marianne lowered her hand, a trembling smile breaking through her tears. "Semper Fi," she replied softly. Only then did the diner seem to breathe again. Hushed whispers rose, and a few gentle claps on shoulders broke the stillness. The cook emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands and nodding toward Marianne. Strangers who had been silent now offered small smiles and grateful eyes. Warmth spread through Marianne's chest, chasing away the cold numbness from earlier. She opened her hand and found her dog tags imprinted in her palm. She pressed the metal to her heart. "Thank you," she said again to everyone, her voice stronger. No other words could capture what she felt, but from their expressions, she knew they understood. At last, Marianne allowed herself a bite of the apple pie that waited for her. It was